Chosen one, look at you. Yeah, you. Still here. Still breathing. Still unbroken. Do you even realize how rare you are? After everything, all the traps, all the fake smiles, all the storms they swore would drown you, here you are scrolling, reading, glowing like a quiet revolution in motion. You don't just survive. You defy. You walk through fires that were designed to consume you and somehow come out brighter. You are the one the shadows talk about when they think no one's listening. You are the one they couldn't figure out, the one their rituals couldn't touch, the one their curses bounced off of like raindrops on armor. And let me tell you something they'll never admit. You terrify them, because no matter what they send your way, you don't fold, you adapt, you rise, you evolve. So welcome, chosen ones. Welcome, warriors in disguise. This isn't just another motivational speech. This is your reminder that you were never ordinary. You were always the exception, the anomaly, the glitch in their dark system. You've been through hell. Good. That means you're carrying heaven in your veins. Let's talk about why you're impossible to break, and why that scares them more than anything else, looking for purpose and peace. Hit subscribe and start the journey. Some beings are woven from a fabric that reality itself refuses to tear. They stand where others would dissolve, not because they dodge the blows, but because the blows dissolve before they reach them. This isn't simply persistence. It's a quiet revolution against the forces that tried to unmake them. And if any lurking shadow listens in, it might want to pay close attention before it tries again. The attempts weren't just aimed at flesh and blood. The goal was to fracture the blueprint, to erase the pattern entirely. What the world saw, failures, betrayals, illnesses, were only surface ripples of something much deeper, beyond perception. Hidden hands were working to dismantle the very thread of existence, to overwrite the origin script and replace it with nothingness. Their strategy wasn't to wound, but to unroot. Not to defeat, but to obliterate memory of presence itself. They sought to cut the cord so completely that even the echo of their target's light would vanish, as if it had never ignited. That's why the struggle felt so strange, impossible to name, because it operated beneath language, in the marrow of being. Yet the design they attacked was shielded by an architecture beyond reach. Symbols, cycles, calculations. They threw everything at it. But the defenses weren't built on anything they could decipher. Each strike they launched unraveled in their own hands. Each trap they laid collapsed under its own weight. Step beyond the screen. Join and help light the way for others. To them, survival here should be unthinkable. By their arithmetic, the outcome was predetermined, disappearance. And yet, against their certainties, the presence they sought to erase became more vivid, more undeniable. Their formulas couldn't contain what they were fighting against. Their rituals choked on the very essence they tried to consume. What remains now is the question they cannot answer. How does what they sought to erase keep existing? Radiant, unbroken, impossible. And the answer lives silently, in the fact that the one they tried to erase walks on, carrying proof that what was meant to vanish can instead become the very thing that undoes the darkness. Some arrivals fracture the silence of centuries. What enters into a lineage through such a birth is not random chance, but deliberate intervention. A quiet storm rises and begins dismantling invisible chains that have strangled entire branches of a family tree. The chain itself was no accident. It was forged long ago, perhaps by a forgotten ancestor who struck a bargain that darkened everything after. That bargain hardened into patterns nobody dared to name. Patterns that wore themselves into lives like grooves on stone. Those grooves looked deceptively ordinary. Misfortune passed down like an heirloom. Sickness that seems inevitable. Relationships that shatter in predictable ways. Opportunities that crumble at the edge of grasp. But beneath that ordinary misery is something alive, feeding and multiplying like roots beneath soil, extracting its due from anyone who carries that blood. If your heart overflows with divine love, now is the moment to let it shine. Click the super thank you button on YouTube and give $50 or more to help carry God's light to others. Your gift will bless not only your life, but countless others. You are part of His sacred plan. Your kindness may be the answer to someone's prayer. Share your blessings and honor His kingdom. May His grace guide you always. And then something interrupts. Not gently, but like a fault line splitting open. The repetition starts unraveling in places no one notices at first. The curse doesn't land the way it always did. The expected collapse takes longer, feels weaker. Resistance appears where none existed before. The disruption isn't clean. It drags through storms no one else in the family remembers surviving. The one who interrupts starts asking questions others swallowed, moving in ways nobody taught, listening for answers no one else could hear. The air itself seems to tighten, as if the forces that fed on the family for generations finally recognize an opponent. Not because the interrupter is flawless, but because they carry signals from somewhere unreachable. Their existence burns away signatures of old pacts written long before they arrived, and the darkness notices. That is why everything seems to rise against them so quickly. That is why so much pressure seems aimed at forcing them to collapse early. The presence of such a soul is an unwelcome anomaly, a disturbance to the order of quiet suffering that's been reliably harvested for lifetimes. But every time it is struck down, it regathers itself and grows sharper, more defiant. Its survival is not only defiance, it is erosion. The machinery of inherited ruin glitches and falters as this presence walks forward. Whether anyone says it aloud or not, something ancient has already been undone because it dared to stand where it wasn't supposed to. And so the hunt begins earlier than most realize. Before anything crashes in the physical world, the attacks start in places no one else can see. Long before betrayal and chaos manifest in waking life, something begins its assault where language fails to reach. The first blows arrive quietly, inward, subtle, relentless. In the in-between moments, when the mind is unguarded and the night feels heavier than it should, that is where the combat begins. Dreams become fields of conflict. Waking hours feel haunted by fatigue that has no explanation. Time distorts, thoughts falter, moods shift unpredictably. This is not simply weariness or chance misfortune. It is an offensive campaign to destabilize the spirit before the body even knows what is happening. The attackers send whispers, distortions, and unseen hands to wear down resolve before open conflict even begins. Step beyond the screen. Join and help light the way for others. Their strategy is to soften what they cannot immediately break, to render the soul so frayed that when calamity does strike, when relationships fracture, when loss appears, when everything falls away, the will to resist has already been drained. Yet when the first phase fails, their panic sets in, because the target persists, even after everything that should have hollowed them out has already passed through. That is when the obvious attacks arrive, relationships that sour, sudden failures, cascading misfortunes that seem orchestrated. But by then, the spirit they sought to extinguish has already built quiet defenses that no one else can see. The unspoken truth is that some victories are won in the dark, before the world even knows there was a battle. And those victories are what infuriate the hunters most, because what they tried to erase rises anyway, growing more difficult to reach every time. And now they are left to reckon with a presence they underestimated, a survivor they never planned for, and a light that should not exist yet does. Some presences are inscribed in laws no one here remembers. Their existence isn't simply permitted, it is inscribed into the architecture of what's real. Long before they breathe, their being is cataloged in chambers that no map could ever trace, in a register so intricate that no word has been invented to describe it. These places don't translate into sound or shape. There, their essence does not speak, it emits, not because of superficial importance, but because they are a key component in something vast and unspoken. They do not merely arrive, they are enacted. That's why every trap laid for them falters, why every spell collapses in on itself. It isn't due to incompetence or accident, but because touching them violates something ancient. Yet the ambitious and the desperate keep trying, distorting currents, forging false scripts, hijacking destinies by brute force. Every attempt rebounds. Some attackers fracture mentally, others lose what they cling to most. A few vanish into obscurity, stripped of their own protections, because they're not simply meddling with another being, they're trespassing against a consecrated function. Nothing about their position here is accidental. They carry something embedded into reality itself. This doesn't mean they're invincible in the way people imagine. It means any harm directed at them exacts a devastating toll on the one who dares. Again and again, the aggressors learn this in the most brutal way. Attempting to rewrite what cannot be rewritten only triggers their own undoing. They retreat eventually, not from mercy but from realization. They recognize too late they've been waging war against something even shadow is forbidden to touch. If your heart overflows with divine love, now is the moment to let it shine. Click the super thank you button on YouTube and give $50 or more to help carry God's light to others. Your gift will bless not only your life, but countless others. You are part of His sacred plan. Your kindness may be the answer to someone's prayer. Share your blessings and honor His kingdom. May His grace guide you always. What none of them comprehend is that every hurt meant to crush this presence instead constructs them. Each wound they survive hardens their essence, layer after layer. They assume breaking someone leaves them open, but here it works differently. Each tear reforges them into something more unapproachable. Betrayal doesn't simply sting, it insulates. Abandonment doesn't simply hollow, it reinforces. Collapse doesn't just end chapters, it welds new armor. The pain they deliver alters not just mood or thought, but the entire frequency the soul inhabits. It sharpens to a point their schemes cannot pierce. The forces that prey on fear, on confusion, on chaos, discover a disorienting truth. The more storms this one survives, the fewer doorways remain. There comes a moment when the usual tactics fail entirely, not because the attack stopped, but because the target has already outlived the worst and repurposed it. They try to sow despair, but it's already been harvested and burned. They attempt to distort the mind, but it has already walked through that fog and memorized the way out. They bring upheaval, but it lands in someone who has already learned how to stand in collapse without flinching. What they never expected is that every attempt would become another rung in the fortress. What they sought to erase builds itself taller each time, not through perfection, but through relentless transformation. Their presence no longer survives because of luck or fragile favor. It endures because of what the pain turned it into. Every loss laid the foundation. Every scar hardened the walls. Every attempt at destruction has only sharpened the shield they never intended to create. Even now, when forces gather and chant and plot, what they strike cannot be broken. Not because it hides, but because the path they aim to use has already been consumed and closed by fire. The shield they face is not separate from the one they hurt. It is the hurt, evolved into an impenetrable boundary. And each time they watch it rise, unbroken, they finally understand. What they tried to obliterate has long since learned how to turn every wound into an unassailable throne. Some souls rewrite themselves in silence. No hospital monitors, no ceremonies, no applause. A quiet rupture splits everything inside, and somehow it all knits itself back together, stronger than before. What happens is not called luck. It is closer to an unseen reconstruction that follows laws few would even believe exist. There is no need for a grave to experience the obliteration of who you thought you were. It comes disguised as nights so heavy they flatten you into the floor, as an emptiness so vast it swallows even your own name. It comes when the colors bleed out of everything familiar, when the voice in your head can't recognize its own tone anymore. And yet, even from that hollow depth, something stirs and begins its climb back into the light. Others stay buried in that strange exile of the mind. They wander among shadows until they forget they ever belonged anywhere else. But not everyone. Some navigate that labyrinth, returning with something sharp and rare carried in their chest. They don't just bring back hope, they bring back a map others don't have. That's why some presences feel older than their years, why their eyes unsettle even strangers. They carry the imprint of countless unseen exoduses, wearing the weight of lives they never outwardly lost. At times the body seems absent, drifting through days like a witness to its own collapse. Yet something refuses to detach fully. Instead of sinking into the quiet void, a choice is made. Breath is reclaimed, motion restored, and over a new self is assembled from the wreckage. Each decision to stay, each refusal to vanish, is another birth unmarked by the world. This explains the way they move differently now, as if they've already crossed the threshold others fear, as if no hex or malice can reach what has already survived the impossible. What stands now is not what fell then. What moves through the world now has shed its earlier skin and returns immune to what once shattered it. There are also those who arrive only after the storm has already claimed the sky. They are not misplaced or late. They are summoned precisely when the earth needs their steps most. Before they appear, the air is already thick with conflict, the quiet defeat of generations echoing everywhere. The ground is littered with silent surrenders, with unspoken chains passed from one to another. The ruin is so ingrained it becomes invisible, mistaken for life itself. And then, at the very center of that long defeat, something unexpected emerges. Not accidental, not fragile, but deliberate. This presence does not come to soothe or blend in. It comes coded with the exact disruption the darkness has no defense against. Its timing is surgical. Its arrival signals that the balance has already begun to shift. That's why the air tightens around them. Why glances grow sharp in rooms they've barely entered. Why certain faces harden without provocation. Their very existence shatters the comfort of those who've grown accustomed to feeding off despair. This awakening doesn't tiptoe. It detonates. Even without grand gestures, the mere awareness carried in this being destabilizes what had felt unshakable. Their smallest choices, their refusal to replicate old harm, their insistence on mending what others abandon. Each act ignites fractures in what thought itself permanent. Those who have long depended on chaos feel something alien creeping in, a clarity they can't contain. Their illusions falter. The patterns crack. Not naive, but raw. Not flawless, but precisely aligned. Every step disrupts generations of stagnation, reversing agreements no one even remembers making. What survives does so not because ease was granted, but because resistance was embedded deep in its marrow. And that is why the darkness always lunges fastest and fiercest against them, because it recognizes the answer has arrived before the question was even fully formed. Some energies are threaded with patterns no adversary can untangle. From the outside, they seem like anyone else, a figure moving through ordinary streets, just another life to bend, break, or consume. But the moment the attack begins, something unexpected surfaces. The usual strategies fail spectacularly. The incantations collapse halfway through. The hooks meant to snag simply slide off into nothing. What they're trying to touch is not only shielded, but strung with layers of cryptic design that defy intrusion. Every particle of that presence hums with signals only the origin can read. It doesn't just carry light. It carries a shifting architecture that camouflages and mutates whenever danger approaches. That's why their readings misfire, why their instruments betray them, why even their most precise rituals deliver nothing but static. They attempt to lock onto names, objects, fragments of memory, but the energy they're chasing has already bent out of reach before they finish. It moves like water, then disappears like vapor, then hardens like glass when cornered. It decides what to show and what to obscure, reporting every trespass directly to its source. Their spells require clear pathways, but every pathway leading into this field twists and folds back on itself, throwing them into confusion. Tools crack, ceremonies falter, even their own bodies rebel. Some find themselves weakened or disoriented just for trying. What they don't see is that this isn't just protection. It's a trap laid for anything that dares violate its boundaries. The very act of interference sets off a cascade that not only repels them, but marks them with their own failure. Some slink away dazed. Others implode under the weight of what they triggered. This is why encounters with that energy tend to polarize people. Either they feel compelled to shelter it, or they lash out in blind frustration. But no matter what they feel, they can't override it. Their words fall flat. Their flames won't catch. And it isn't because it's invulnerable in the usual sense. It's because its essence is written in a dialect they were never meant to decipher. Some awakenings are meant to happen quietly, unnoticed at first, and that's how they slip through undetected. Not because they're weak or oblivious, but because they're learning, watching. For generations, the system has depended on confusion. The goal is to keep each participant distracted, numb, stumbling through the same endless maze, unaware they're walking a path already mapped by others. The machinery relies on repetition, the same wounds, the same concessions, the same chains disguised as customs and comfort. But then comes a fracture. a being who begins to see the underlying patterns and refuses to keep performing them. At first, the recognition is subtle, a growing discomfort, questions that don't quiet down. Then it swells into clarity that shatters everything. Suddenly, the loops become visible, familiar misfortunes recycled in new shapes, emotional traps wearing new masks, inherited ruin masquerading as normal. Where others shrug and surrender, this presence interrogates the very ground it stands on. That defiance alone loosens the gears. It doesn't stop there. The choices follow. They disengage from the rituals passed down like heirlooms, but carrying hidden chains. They cut ties with those designed to drain and entangle them. They unlearn the silence they were taught to swallow. They walk out of rooms guilt tried to nail them inside. And each choice sends ripples through the web. Every refusal breaks a circuit. Every word spoken in unclouded allegiance to their origin undoes layers of accumulated damage, sometimes decades, sometimes centuries deep. These acts may feel like personal boundaries, but in reality they are revolutions, flares that burn through generations of quiet defeat. This is what the system fears most. The moment one soul ceases to cooperate and instead becomes the breach through which light floods back into the bloodline. Once that pivot happens, what used to find them no longer can. What haunted the family loses its grip. What flowed like poison through the veins dissipates into nothing. They never expected someone to figure it out. Not like this. Not quietly, not persistently, not without spectacle. But once the root is severed, nothing grows back. Some souls arrive already claimed by forces higher than any oath uttered in shadow. Behind the scenes, entire schemes are built to ensnare them. Obscure ceremonies, hidden exchanges, whispered pledges written in secret symbols, objects marked to bind them to destinies they never consented to. Every move calculated to trap them in invisible prisons. No walls, no chains, yet impossible to escape. For a time, it might even seem like it's working. Heavy days stack upon heavy nights, and nothing seems to move forward. The same setbacks appear again and again, as if someone is pulling threads out of the fabric of their life. But what the architects of these traps never account for is the existence of a preordained agreement written before their plotting ever began. Well before breath enters lungs, the essence of this being is already signed into an unbreakable covenant, one impossible to override. That promise isn't etched on paper or stone, but into the very scaffolding of reality. It cancels every trick, neutralizes every snare, invalidates every pact made against them, no matter how cleverly hidden or fiercely enforced. Because here, hierarchy matters, jurisdiction matters, and the highest seal always takes precedence. That's why their efforts always fall apart sooner or later. Yes, confusion may take hold. Yes, losses may sting. Yes, setbacks may pile high for a season, but the foundation beneath it all remains untouchable. Every time they attempt to rebind what's already been claimed elsewhere, the structure they build crumbles. Doors they pry open slam shut, as though slammed from the inside. Knots they tie unravel into nothing, because their hands were never granted access in the first place. Even when the one they target doesn't yet understand this immunity, it holds firm. But once awareness begins to dawn, once the prayers deepen and authority is consciously claimed, the collapse of their entire operation accelerates. What they spent years crafting disintegrates almost instantly. Their currencies lose power. Their tokens lose meaning. Their sacrifices are rejected outright. They are left grasping at ashes. What protects this soul is untouchable, unbreakable, and unreachable. Written in a language that neither darkness nor deception can translate, backed by something timeless and beyond their reach. And that is the reason the attacks never fully succeed. Not because the attackers don't try hard enough, but because their reach was never enough to touch what they thought they owned. It would be a mistake to assume there was never a battle. The quiet here is not the absence of violence, but the aftermath of it. There were always attempts, deliberate, precise, relentless. Names spoken into silence. Effigies desecrated in hidden places. Threads of their life tied into knots and buried deep in earth, or burned, or drowned. These are not accidents, not random streaks of bad luck. These are fully intentional acts of aggression meant to fracture, weaken, and dismantle. The deception they rely on most is the lie that no one notices, that the target will assume nothing happened, that the weight they feel is simply their own fault. But in truth, the strikes do land. They simply fail to deliver the intended devastation. That distinction is critical. Their machinery spins, their rituals ignite, their curses surge outward, and still nothing sticks. Because the soul they aim for does not absorb harm passively. Its very nature repels, reroutes, and returns what was sent. Like a system designed not just to withstand force, but to collapse the weapon from within. Some of those who launch such attacks experience consequences so sharp and sudden they vanish from sight entirely. Their strength drains. Their minds fracture. Their homes become haunted by the echoes of what they invoked. What they never understand is that the energy they send strikes a barrier that rebounds everything back toward them. It is not vengeance. It is balance. What violates the law of harmony binds itself in its own trap. So make no mistake, they aim again and again. They are confident at first. They expect submission, weakness, and silence, until the pattern reverses, and they feel the weight of what they call down settle on their own shoulders.